On this episode of Prisoners of Rock and Roll, we're stepping into the grimy, graffiti-smeared chaos of CBGB, the legendary Bowery dive bar that became punk's ground zero, the Cathedral of Misfits. Picture this, December 1973. Hilly Kristal, a former Marine, opens a bar at 315 Bowery, dreaming of country, bluegrass, and blues. Instead, the junkies and misfits of New York's underbelly gave him something else, a friggin' revolution. CBGB wasn't just a club, it was a musical laboratory for rebels. The Ramones hammered out three-chord blitzkriegs. Patti Smith snarled poetry into punk. Blondie strutted into stardom, and the Talking Heads turned weird into gold, all while helping change rock and roll forever. The place stank. The bathrooms were a nightmare, but the music, pure unpolished fire. By the 1980s, Sunday matinees flipped it to hardcore. Bands like Bad Brains and the Beastie Boys' early thrash days tore the roof off the place. From punk's birthplace to its brutal evolution, CBGB launched a global DIY movement, proving you didn't need polish, just guts. But the story does end ugly. Rent wars and gentrification killed CBGB in 2006, turning a punk mecca into a fashion boutique and a friggin' airport restaurant. So grab your leather jacket because we're diving into the birthplace of rebellion, the chaos inside those peeling walls, and how a little club with a country name rewrote rock and roll history. This is CBGB, completely unfiltered. Let's hit it. What's up, everybody? Welcome to Prisoners of Rock and Roll, episode number 96. My name is Bruce Kramer. Thanks so much for listening. I love doing this show and getting to talk about the almighty power of rock and roll with all of you, especially because I get to do it with the man I'm about to introduce to you now. The Ramones said Sheena is a punk rocker, but so is he. As Debbie Harry said, one way or another, he's going to get you. He's an uplifting Gorbundizer. With a rebel yell, he'll cry more. His bar has been around much longer than CBGB's. It doesn't smell even half as bad as that place did. You know him, you love him, and if you don't, you do now. The one and only Mr. Ryan McCusker.
Are you rocking?
Prisoners of Rock and Roll is sponsored by Boldfoot Socks and McCusker's Tavern in Philadelphia, and our show is so proud to be part of Pantheon Media. What's up, my brother?
Wow, that was like a primal scream from me, bro.
That was a good one. I think I heard that from my house without even through my earphones.
I had to get a little emotion out, you know? It is what it is, brother.
It's all good, man. Let's just jump into it, dude. You friggin' hit this out of the park with these topics. You messaged me right after, like the day after the last episode, and you're like, I got it. Let's talk about the history of CBGB. And I was like, oh my God, perfect.
We talk about all kinds of things about rock and roll. Why not talk about a club? You know, it's like, what's more that started anything in America more than CBGB's did? Besides the Whiskey Go-Go, what's the most famous club there is? Probably CBGB's when it was open, you know?
Right. The Rainbow Room, or, you know,
Rainbow's a restaurant.
Yeah, that's true. Us living in Jersey, I mean, the Stone Pony is important and very locally, but it's not like a global thing like CBGB is.
Yeah, you go to, like, I don't know, probably like somewhere they don't speak English, and somebody sees a CBGB shirt there, and they probably stop you on the street or something.
Yeah, I think people, if you're into music, you know what it is. You've seen the logo.
I mean, they sell the shirts at fucking Target. I had one from CBGBs when I went.
So we need to get into that because you did mention something as we were, we text a lot as we're getting ready to get up to the show. And you said something about going there. I had never been to CBGB, but apparently you have.
I always took it for granted, like, oh, it's just CBGBs, blah, blah, blah. But then the rumor went out that it was closing. So me and a friend of mine, we would go to Yankees games all the time. So it wasn't a big deal that we were at the Yankees game. He's like, CBGBs are playing bands all times of the day because they're closing, kind of thing. He's like, we should just go see what's going on. So we left the Yankees game to go to CBGBs in the middle of the day. And there was a band playing. It was like on a Wednesday. And we're like, here we are. This is fucking amazing. It was a toilet, like fucking for real. Like everything that you hear about it is fucking true.
Was that the first time you had gone?
That was the first time I've gone. It's the only time. And then a few weeks later, they closed because it was like open one day and then boom, closed.
At least you went. I mean, again, how many times do we do the show and we talk about, like, if a band you like is coming, go see them because you don't know when they're not going to be around anymore. I mean, the place is an hour and a half from us. And I never went because I always just thought it was always going to be there.
Exactly. Like I said, I took it for granted. All the times I've been to New York City, but it was that one time that I went.
Well, it's super cool that you got to go. Especially as time increases from when it closed and now, there will be fewer and fewer people who said they went. So the fact that you got to experience that, and you said you talked to Hilly Kristal, right?
Well, Hilly Kristal was in his office, and my buddy pointed him out, and I was like, all right, we got to graffiti this place a little bit. So he's on the phone, and he kind of looks out in the hallway. I'm standing there. He's like, hey, what's up? I'm like, can I get a marker? He's like, yep. So we tagged the bathroom pretty bad. That is the only time in my life that I've ever graffitied. And it was in the bathroom of the CBGBs on the toilet.
And they didn't care.
Because it was closed a couple weeks later.
Doing research for the show, I always heard how, the Ramones and Blondie started there, the Talking Heads. But I was friggin' blown away by the number of artists that came through that place and just the whole story of, I said in the monologue, it was like a laboratory for people to do shit. And the fact that he, well, let me back up a second. Let me just kind of explain how we got up to that. And we get into a little bit like how important this friggin' place was. But I have in my notes that CBGB is the second most legendary dive bar in the world behind McCusker's Tavern.
Thank you.
And so CBGB, it is such an interesting story, man, because the place opened in like 73 and this dude, Hilly Kristal, opened it. And CBGB, the full name, right, was CBGB OMFUG. And CBGB stand for Country, Bluegrass, and Blues. And the OMFUG was Other Music for Uplifting Gormandizers. And Hilly Kristal always said, like, everybody thought that OMFUG stood for something else, like, oh my God, FU or something else. He liked that it sounded crude, but he wanted it to be a country bar. He was like a country music fan. He didn't even like punk music, but somebody convinced him to start putting bands in at CBGB, and he's like, all right, man, we'll do it, but the only two rules I have are the guys got to load in and load out their own shit and set it up, and they can't play covers. And then it just started this whole enormous originality thing.
I think no way any fucking hillbilly country music guy would go down to Bowery, go into a place like that, and have a gig. I think Hilly had no choice but to have these junky punk rock fucking kids to have any kind of music in his fucking place. Especially he had to fucking pay them.
Right. So the arrangement that he had was pretty simple, that the bands got a lot of the door and the CBGB kept the bar, and he didn't pay anybody. It was basically like, okay, man, do your thing. And the more people that you attract to pay a cover to come in and see you, the more money you make.
That's how most of the gigs work. Nobody ever gets part of the bar.
You mentioned that people would, like, no country band would want to go down there, which is a great segue into like what New York City was like, or what that neighborhood was like when that place opened in the early 70s. And it was a it was a shithole.
Oh my God, it's a fucking understatement. It was just everything deteriorating. Old New York was falling apart.
Every bad cliche you think of, like New York went through this whole like we're going to clean up the streets kind of thing in the 90s. Every bad thing before that, you could use this neighborhood as a perfect example. There were so many flop houses in that friggin' area that the 2 blocks around CBGB's, they estimated 2,000 people live there. It's crazy.
Dude, it was such a bad neighborhood. Homeless people would be out there, die, and be out there for days and no one know they were dead.
I have a quote from Hilly Kristal. He said, almost everybody in the area were alcoholics, drug addicts, the physically impaired, the mentally unstable. Some were Vietnam veterans on disability. The streets were strewn with bodies, alcoholic derelicts sleeping it off, muggers hanging around the Bowery, preying on everybody, people that had been just let out of jail and mental institutions. Like, all these people were all swarming around this place, and this dude opened a bar.
How can it not be punk rock with all that shit going on?
Sure.
More than a fucking country thing. No way. No fucking way. At that time, no way a country bar would have survived. But what do I know?
No, you're exactly right. Well, so Hilly Kristal was a little bit of like a hippie sounding dude. He's actually put out some music, and I found some of it. Here's him singing a song called Birds and the Bees.
I saw a little bird sitting in a tree who wanted to start a family, who went tweet, 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 tweet. He was looking for a she. He couldn't wait to find a mate. Sat in a tree and sang a plea. He went a tweet, 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 tweet. He was looking for a she.
That's awful.
Dude, he's such a weird guy. Like, you have to be, right? You got to be a little fucking crazy to did what he did where it was. He sound crazy with that song. I guess he wrote that song.
Yeah, that was not good. That was the most played song he has on Spotify. Just like, oh, he's got some albums. Let me grab the #1 song. I'm like, oh my God.
Why isn't, well, we'll talk about it later seriously, but why, because of his music, why isn't he in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
As an influencer, sure.
No, I mean, we could talk about that.
Oh, you mean like
musically.
That went right over my head and I didn't even see it. That was hit me in the face. Yeah, dude, but he really is this incredibly important dude in the story of rock and roll because he gave all these people a voice. There's so many artists that we've talked about, like Bowie and Michael Jackson. People, like, they see them and they're like, it's okay to be weird. And people realize they could be weird at this bar and they just started flocking there.
Like David Bowie and Michael Jackson might have been weird, but they were like Studio 54 weird. CBGB was a whole other fucking ball game.
Yes, totally agree. And the bar, like CBGB, was like, it wasn't this big place, man. It was really tiny. Yeah. It only held like 300 people.
McCusker's is bigger than in parts of it. Yeah, McCusker's is bigger.
Yeah, and the legends, anytime you talk about the place, you always hear about how the floor was sticky and the graffiti and the stickers and the friggin' bad. The toilet is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because it's so legendarily disgusting.
I tagged that thing.
If only we were still doing a show, you could have put a Prisoner to Rock and Roll sticker on it.
Yes.
And then when the toilet wound up in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, although our stickers are in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, in that one area where you're allowed to tag everything, I put a ton of them up there last summer.
Because, why wouldn't we be in the Hall of Fame?
Of course. We got in there before Motley Crue did. It is so interesting that CBGB, like so many of these artists, like, they went from underground to mainstream, and they really did help bring punk music to the masses from being in this underground thing. Something
out of that decay and all that shit, something artistic had to come from it, and what else describes, besides early hip hop, describes New York City at the times in the 70s. Like that, sure. Like the shit that was coming out of CBGB's is a product of what decay of New York City was.
Even like we did a whole episode on the rise of punk music, and they were talking about like the did the Brits do it, and then the Americans were doing it, and New York and London were going at the same time. But at some point, the British groups start coming here. And it was like a big deal when the Brits started playing like when the Damned comes here and they play CBGB, then it was like, oh shit, now it's
Legit.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think a lot of these bands could play at other clubs. I don't think other clubs would accept them at the time. I mean, we're talking about in the 70s. Disco's just starting to happen. Everybody's getting dressed up. Everybody's going out. Everybody at CBGB's is wearing trash.
I read that too, like interview with Hilly Kristal, and he was like, this is at the height of the disco era, and a lot of people just wanted to get back to basics with rock and roll. He called it street rock, and street rock eventually became punk rock, but he was like, garage rock turned into street rock, and street rock turned into punk music. But
street rock is cool. I like that.
Yeah, that is a good name.
That's basically what I am describing.
Some people were saying, and you would know this more than me, being a musician, but they said he didn't want bands to play covers because he didn't want to play royalties.
Exactly. Oh, yeah.
If you play royalties in a club, you have to, if a band plays covers, you have to pay royalties for that shit?
It is so bad, Bruce. I am not allowed to play Spotify in the bar because I'm not paying the $1 or whatever it is in the jukebox. That's
really
legit. Yeah, that's like a law.
Huh. Okay.
But I don't do it anyway.
All right.
I play whatever the fuck I want. But yeah, we had phone calls, legit phone calls from a company. I forget the name of it, but they were like checking it out. And instead of getting in with them, we just paid the $100 they wanted to the license, whatever.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a real fucking thing, dude.
So bands were coming in and playing cover songs. Somebody could have gone to the bar and been like, yo, you didn't pay us.
Exactly.
Wow.
There is a story out there that I've heard for years that Jimmy Buffett had a side company that just went out there and looked for guys playing his songs.
Wow.
Dude, you just go down to fucking Florida and all those motherfuckers are playing
right.
songs.
It's everywhere you go. Wow, that's so fascinating to me. Okay. I heard that several times and I was like, who is going into the fucking Bowery and hearing whether you're playing a YMCA cover, whatever the hell was popular, disco and prog rock and everything else.
That's how New York was, I guess more than Philly, it was serious about their entertainment licenses because there was so much of it, I don't know.
I think it's so interesting too that this is coming up in the mid 70s because music largely is just fucking weird at the time.
70s? Oh yeah. What's out at this time? The fucking Carpenters and Leif Garrett and shit?
Right. Like Jethro Tull and Rock and Roll Archaeology, the flagship show on Pantheon, they did an episode on prog rock and how like Genesis is getting really weird and Yes and King Crimson and all that shit. Yeah. I hate that music.
I love the movie Salt Lake City Punk. I don't know if you ever seen it.
No.
Great fucking movie. And basically they wrap it up to the ending, how they got into punk rock, and the one kid's like a dork playing D&D and he's listening to Rush, and the other kid comes down and is like, I'm tired of this shit, man. I'm tired of this fucking rock and roll. Where's the danger? I'm not saying they're not good musicians or whatever, but there's nothing to it.
It's a big pendulum, man. Like music starts really, the country goes into rock and roll with Elvis and rockabilly, and then it gets really, garage rock, and then you get like the Beatles, and then you get the complicated prog shit, and it goes back to punk, and then you get the 80s new wave, and then it goes back to grunge. It just keeps going back and forth.
Oh yeah, I think music goes in a circle anyway. Maybe classical music will be coming back soon.
Like CBGB became a scene, and one thing I found so interesting was reading about like how many of these bands that became famous that came out of here, like they all cross-pollinated, because it would be like this band played and so was in the audience, and this person was playing guitar, and they all went out and become like different musicians.
Sure. Oh yeah.
I have a couple of notes on it. So when CBGB started booking rock and roll bands, he booked this band called Squeeze. just to be like a residency, and not the British band that sang that song Tempted.
I hate that song.
Yeah, that the warden sent that to the electric chair when he was on our show. But
At least he's good for something.
But the band Squeeze that played, the one dude later became another. He went and was in another band. It became the CBGB house band. Somebody who wound up leaving and becoming in Patti Smith's group, and one guy was in the band Television. And it's just, there's all this kind of cross-pollination, like, oh, this band played and Debbie Harry was in the audience and she got her band together to play, and so cool. It just like snowballed.
It's amazing, but like that's what punk rock was. Like anybody could play it. It's all about passion.
And they said like, oh, well, I want to do that. And then they just round up some friends and they went to CBGBs. And then there was a whole nother scene going on in New York City a little bit before that. There was this place called the Mercer Art Center. It was in this big decaying hotel in Greenwich Village, and there were like poetry readings, and there was like theaters and music places and shit like that. And this place had a big music following, and the building friggin' collapsed and like 4 people died.
Oh, I know about this. Yeah.
But then all the bands were like, we have nowhere to go, and they all went to CBGBs. One thing that I found so interesting doing the research for this was how many, like the diversity of types of music that came out of this shit. And I've got some examples that we can play, but I'm like, it's not all just like the Ramones and the Misfits and Bad Boys and
no, I mean,
it all.
Television is like the early version of Weezer.
Yeah, dude. Let's get into that too. The bands were so different. Like the Ramones in their leather jackets, Debbie Harry was friggin' hot. The Talking Heads were nerds. And Television was the band that, like, if CBGB is an explosive, Television is the fuse that lit it. They were like a little jazzy. They're hard to put in a category what they are.
That's exactly the way you have to explain a lot of this music.
Yeah, I totally agree. Hang on, let me play a little bit of Television. Let's illustrate what we're talking about. And I feel like they're a band that people know who they are. Like you've heard of them, but I don't know if like I don't know a whole lot. I don't know a whole lot of the music. Marquee Moon is one of their biggest songs. So here's 30 seconds of that. Lightning struck itself. I was listening to the rain. I was hearing something else.
See what I mean? Like, not that Weezer sounds like them or anything like that, but it's their music is a little bit more complicated than the Ramones are.
No, comparing them to Weezer is a really good point because
they could be a band now. Their sound is still happening. Like they sound like the Strokes sound like them.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't they're hard to define like what they are.
But here they come out of this fucking punk rock palace.
And they didn't really like commercially do a whole lot. Like I said, I don't think a ton of people, if you're a casual music fan, I don't think you know a whole lot about them.
Oh no.
I didn't. I mean, not to be like, if you're a casual person, you don't know shit, but you're a socialite like Ryan and I. We know what we're talking about. I knew the name, but I went back and listened to some of the music, and I was like, okay. I don't think I would listen to it. Like, I wouldn't fire it up and turn it on.
Right. The sound and the idea, Yeah. It's before its time.
Yes. And it's interesting because this was the first band that Hilly Kristal said that he believed in. And he was like, all right, I think you guys are onto something here by playing rock and roll in my club.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. How can you ignore that sound?
And the band is featured rather prominently in the movie CBGB with Alan Rickman. And I know you told me to watch it. I fucking couldn't get through 45 minutes of that.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
I tried, and I was like, I can't. I didn't like it.
Okay.
There is a movie about CBGB that Alan Rickman, famously from Hans Gruber from Die Hard, is Hilly Kristal. It's got some weird artistic shit to it. The way it's got a little like comic book style applied to it.
Yeah.
I couldn't.
But it's
get
more
past
than
it.
just about the club. It's like about like the born of punk rock, because they're talking about the kids who made the punk rock magazine, and I like the movie. I don't know,
Okay.
but I like anything rock and roll.
Yeah.
It tells a story.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I just couldn't. I couldn't do it. But I have another band that kind of spun off of television, and that was Richard Hell and the Voidoids.
I don't know them.
So Richard Hell was in the band Television, and he also was in the Heartbreakers with Johnny Thunders from the New York Dolls.
Right.
And he left Television and started this band, the Voidoids. And it's also interesting because Marky Ramone is also in this band.
Interesting.
And the story always was, according to I looked on diffuser.com, they said when Malcolm McLaren, who managed the Sex Pistols, when he saw this dude Richard Hell perform, he went back to the Sex Pistols and was like, this is how you guys need to act. This is what you need to dress like. So this is a song called Blank Generation by Richard Hell and the Voidoids.
Such a gamble when you get a face. It's fascinating to observe what the mirror does, but when I dine it for the wall that I've set a place, I belong to the blank generation, and I can take it or leave it each time. Well, I belong to the generation, but I can take it or leave it each time. Triangles are falling at the window as the doctor.
Love it, dude.
It sounded like the Stray Cats a little bit, with like a little bit of like television put in. It was cool. It's got a little rockabilly to it.
What I think is interesting, I'm sure they're not playing on very expensive instruments. And like the sound that they're getting out of it is like making the sound of what evolved into this style of rock and roll.
Yeah.
You know, like the cheaper the instrument, the better that style of rock and roll is.
You say a lot on the show about like the recording process becoming an instrument and being a factor in how things sound, and the recording booth becoming an instrument.
And, you know, I think bands like the Ramones made that first record. You listen to it, it sounds really poorly, like it was done, but it was at a time when, like, you know, Yes was recording and Genesis was recording, and the Ramones, like, no, we want it to sound like it's coming out of a trash can.
Right. That's the point. And then that makes it artistic. Well, let's talk about the Ramones, because they're like I just mentioned that Marky Ramone was in that band. And the Ramones played their very first shows at CBGB's. They said their first gig, they played 12 songs in 20 minutes. This is like, I love that, because you also at the same time, you got Yes that are playing one song in 20 minutes.
12 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember or not, but I made the Ramones my number one American rock and roll band.
You did. Yes, I do remember that.
And then, and I'll stand by it now. Here's these four fucking misfits that probably couldn't do anything else but dig ditches or be the Ramones. They barely knew what they were doing. They had right direction, and they fucking made one of the greatest debut albums that was ever fucking made.
Absolutely. And they said when they played their first show at CBGB's, there was like 10 people there, which is also a good point, because there's so many of these artists that you would think like, oh my God, the Ramones played at this little tiny place, and you would think it'd be packed. Or like, no, man, like
everybody hated them.
Right. And all these artists, like Blondie, like there's nobody in the friggin' bar. The Talking Heads, they said they played to a guy and his dog. Like,
I've done those gigs, man. That's how gigs go.
Right. And now you're here doing this.
Is.
Right. And now you're here doing the show with me. So it just shows how famous the path to success.
Exactly.
But the Ramones, man, were like everything that was the complete 180 versus what was going on with prog rock. I put on my my notes, I just wrote fast, loud, no solos, no bullshit.
There is a picture of the Ramones on their way to their first gig on the subway. And Johnny Ramone has that famous white guitar in a fucking shopping bag. Like, that's how he didn't have a case for it. He had a fucking shopping bag. And, you know, you see these other bands treating their instruments like gold, you know, and this guy's like, I have one guitar. I don't have a case. I have a fucking shop. Like, you should look it up, dude. It's hysterical.
I will. But it's like it's everything that you heard about, like everything that CBGB stands for, like that dirty, grimy, do it yourself, just fucking work hard and put some energy into it. That was the Ramones.
Oh, they were what CBGB stood for. Absolutely.
You want to get all like bigger picture about it. It's like that's America, right? You roll your bootstraps and you work your ass off.
That's why I think we invented punk rock.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think the Ramones were the first ones. I think Stooges were. You know, the Stooges predate CBGBs.
Yeah, MC5 is a little. Yeah, we did a whole show on that, and with the the Brits versus New York. But all right, I'm gonna play a little bit of Blitzkrieg Bop because why not?
Their original drummer was Tommy Ramone, and he was almost like the brains of the outfit. Man, you hear that drums. He learned how to play the drums to be in the Ramones. He was like one of their friends, and you hear that fucking rawness on it, what makes the Ramones the Ramones. And I'm hearing the cymbal crashes. He's got one fucking cymbal, and it's the same sound over and over again.
Because the sound is like, it's very compressed, right? It's like you said, it's not recorded.
It's made that way.
Right.
It's made that way.
It sounds shitty. It sounds like something that would be coming out of my 1980 Corvette's speakers.
But it was made that way in a studio that was fucking making, 1970s prog rock or whatever New York City was doing at the time,
Shit. What is a more punk rock than Hey Ho, Let's Go?
Right.
Other than maybe like Oi 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 or any of that other crap, but Hey Ho, Let's Go is, everybody knows that if you're into punk rock music, and you immediately think of the dudes in the leather jackets.
And if you know the Ramones, you can go even further than that. Say Gabba Gabba Hey. That's a deeper shout out.
The Ramones are so brilliant in how like anti-music establishment they were.
Johnny played one fucking guitar the whole fucking career. And it sold at like Christie's auction house for some crazy amount of fucking money.
They're one of the best American rock and roll bands ever.
Come on. I mean, 4 guys that was sniffing glue.
Watching cartoons.
And somebody, DJ Ramone IQ is fucking low. But he wrote all those fucking songs, man. He wrote all those fucking songs. Like all the words and shit.
They're always the band that like you just play up against that artsy shit like King Crimson. The guys are singing about Lord of the Rings and fairies and all this elaborate arrangements. And you get these 4 guys all wearing the same outfit, watching Spider-Man,
right?
And
eating baseball cards,
right? Eating Frosted Flakes,
yeah.
And just like we don't know what the hell we're doing, and we're proud of the fact that we don't know what the hell we're doing.
They're from a part of New York City called Forest Hills, and Forest Hills are basically all high-rise apartment buildings, and they were almost like, God forgive me to say, but almost like the white projects.
Okay,
like it was like low income kind of thing, and it was all like white people. Oh, you go there now, forget about it. It's. I was there a couple of years ago, and the property's worth so much fucking money. But for what it was in the 70s, the Ramones came from fucking nothing. Like I said, they had no other choice but to be the Ramones. They were such freaks.
That's what made them such a great story. We could talk for hours on them. I know we both really like them.
They're important.
Absolutely. Another band that came out of CBGB that I fucking love is Blondie.
Yeah.
And Blondie Debbie Harry was in the audience a lot of these shows. She was in a band called the Stilettos, and then Stilettos became Angel and the Snake. and that became Blondie. The only other note I have is it said, shit, think about Debbie Harry and how she looks and it being on stage in that filthy dump of a place. And,
you know, Blondie is a complete different band than the Ramones.
absolutely.
And meaning that Blondie, they're great musicians, those guys. They're fucking unbelievable. Like, some of their songs are so complicated. I tried to play them in a band here and there. And they're the complete different than what the Ramones were. They actually knew what the fuck they were doing. You listen to some of their songs, it's like they had it together.
And they had her.
Oh, yeah. In
Right,
that movie, you say, you know, how she's like, you know, this beautiful woman in this place. And she's up there in the movie with this dress on. She's like, "You like my dress?"
Right.
Even the trash in New York City is beautiful.
I read a lot of quotes from her too, talking about how the place smelled like shit, but it was our shit.
Well, they had a dog. Like, Hilly had a dog or a few stray dogs in the fucking club, and it would shit everywhere.
And that's what she said, like their first gig, they played the Hilly and the dog. But yeah, and Blondie's always like a weird band that like where they fit in because they get lumped in with the CBGB crowd, but they are a little like new wave, but they were ahead of the time.
They were ahead of
wave.
the times. They were, look what she did. She did the rap gimmick in one of the first songs.
Right, Rapture. Right.
Yeah. She saw something that was fucking real, just like she saw the punk was. She saw that hip hop was real.
Is she such like a crossover because she was a model and a waitress, and then she was in this like kind of punk scene. My wife is so sick of hearing me talk about how much I like her.
Yeah, how can you not? And she can fucking sing, dude.
Right, and she's talented. Right, she's not just some piece of ass who's up strutting around saying like I'm hot. Like,
yeah, she's not Britney Spears. Like, Britney Spears can't sing worth of shit.
Right,
you know, Blondie could fucking sing.
Right, she looked good, but it was never like the main thing. Like, she'd be up there singing and she was in a baby doll t-shirt or something.
Sex sells.
Yeah, but it wasn't like kicking you in the face with it. It wasn't like
she was so gorgeous, it didn't matter what the fuck she had on.
Like Christina Aguilera can really sing. And at one point she went through like her whore phase and she was
she's wearing chaps.
Right, her boobs are hanging. It was kind of like, okay. Like at that point, I'm like, I'm not paying attention to your singing talent anymore. You're just being kind of gross. Debbie Harry was never like gross with her beauty.
I mean, the 70s fashion was a lot more tasteful than like the 90s fashion was.
Yes.
There was a lot more to it. It was maybe a little bit more simple. So Debbie Harry's up there in a half shirt, looks fucking amazing, like no one ever has.
Yes.
You know, it's her. It's not the clothes. It's her.
Dude, you're spot on. Let me play something from her before I get flagged as a creep for rambling on about how gorgeous she was. This is Ex-Offender. It was a little bit more of a punk song than some other pop stuff.
Great, dude. I mean, you could see how they progressed into something else. But like, she has unbelievable talent right off the bat.
It sounded a little like Velvet Underground to me. Like that,
everything did it.
The music did.
I mean, Lou Reed was, one of the godfathers of punk.
Yeah, I feel like she's kind of straddling the line between like the Ramones and Velvet Underground.
Still probably trying to find her sound, but there's that Blondie hook in that song that you only hear in Blondie songs. I heard that right away.
Yeah, really.
I said, they were better musicians. Like, there was a lot going on in that song,
which makes it so interesting because compared to what the Ramones are doing and some of these other bands we're going to talk about, it just keep on moving on. Another band that became huge, it came out of that, and they're so different than anything else, is the Talking Heads. And I know Josh from Boldfoot is probably turning up his radio right now because he keeps asking us to talk about the Talking Heads. But like,
they're so awesome.
The nerds at it, like Blondie's the hot one. The Ramones are like the degenerates, and the Talking Heads are like the art nerds.
Talking Heads lived across the street from CBGB's, and David Burns is fucking brilliant, man. From the jump, they sound like nothing like ever before. Okay, maybe the Ramones sound a little bit like the Stooges, but what the fuck does Talking Heads sound like when they come out? Nothing.
I read that like their first show at CBGB was opening for the Ramones. I'm like, oh my god, what kind of reaction does that get if you want to hear the Ramones and then you hear them? I was just watching that anniversary concert for Saturday Night Live, and it was largely uninteresting. But when David Byrne came out, I was like, "Oh, okay, I want to hear that, and I want to see him." And he's still weird, and he sounds
come out.
great.
I missed that. I must have turned it off before then.
He did a couple things. He didn't do any Talking Head stuff, but it was like, all right, yeah, man, he's weird and quirky in like a Bowie way, but it's like not annoying.
I would love to go see him. He played the Man Music Center in Philly.
Yeah, like last summer or something.
It was a while ago because my cousin went, and he's been passed for like 10 years.
Okay.
And he said, and of course I was working that night. That's why I didn't go. He said he did all this Talking Head shit. He says it was fucking, but I don't give a fuck what he does. I just want to, I'll like whatever he does. I don't even have to know any of the songs. I don't even care. It's him.
Yeah. He's like a real like visual dude, like Peter Gabriel's like that, Bjork is like that, like just visual shit in addition to the music. And he does have like a really interesting voice.
I think it's one of a kind.
Yeah.
And maybe people try to copy it a little bit, especially in the 80s, like with the new wave kind of thing.
He's kind of got that weird, like that hiccuping sound. Like Buddy Holly was real famous for doing that. I put Psycho Killer on the playlist because also like they played that in the very early days at CBGB, and the Talking Heads came up through CBGB and they outgrew it very, very quickly and got very big. But I also put Life During Wartime on here, and I thought maybe I'll play that because he does mention like this ain't no disco, this ain't no
CBGB.
Yeah, so I'll play a little bit.
That's a better song.
Yeah, they're both fucking great
yeah,
songs.
But we always hear Psycho Killer on the radio.
Yeah. Man, they're great.
They're great musicians. Again, another band that was fucking way above pay grade of the regular bands that were playing at CBGB's at the time. That's why they didn't play there long, if anything, is because they fucking outgrew it, and it was like, boom, I could see that.
Right. They very quickly were onward and upward. They're a band, man, I don't listen to a lot casually, but getting exposed to them doing the show, I'm like, all right, I need to dive in a little bit more. I always find them interesting. Every time I hear them, I'm like, oh, wow, that's really interesting and cool. And I need more.
I'll put the greatest hits on, dude. That's all.
I want to go deeper than that.
You know every song on it.
Good point. Because they're also a band like oh my God, I know that song. Like, okay, the Talking Heads, what are they? And you're like, oh my God, I know like 20 songs from them.
Do you remember he made that weird movie?
No.
It was, remember they did the song, Wow, Wow, Love?
Yeah.
That was the song for the movie he put out at that time.
Okay.
That was like the single. And I remember watching the movie on cable, and it was so fucking weird. He was like this cowboy or some shit. Yeah. Anyway.
Patti Smith also came out of CBGB. So she was like a poet who was hanging around that Mercer Arts Center that collapsed and came over to CBGB. And then she just started, she got a band together just so she could get up on stage and read her poetry, and they would play music behind it. And I love that idea because you've got like, there's so many different paths that these artists have taken to become successful. Like the Talking Heads are this kind of like art project, and the Ramones are these four knuckleheads. And she's like, I just want to read my poetry on stage.
She's from like fucking South Jersey or fucking
Yeah. Yep.
Pennsylvania.
She called CBGB her church. At some point, she hits it big, and she did like a residency where she was doing 2 shows a day, 5 nights a week for like 2 months, and just became a fixture at CBGB. And she was the one. She played the last show at CBGB.
Yeah.
She closed it.
Oh yeah,
I struggle getting into her music. It's a little. It's not
an
my
acquired
thing.
taste. It's like
Yeah.
She's like the female version of fucking Tom Waits.
Yeah.
Tom Waits is more creative than she is, but
Yeah, I see that connection. I don't think I've listened to her music since the last time we talked about her.
but she was good enough that Springsteen wrote a fucking song for her. Or he didn't write it for her. He had it laying around. Jimmy Iovine was like, she needs a song.
Yeah, Because of Night. All right, so here's Gloria, which is a little bit of the cover with the Van Morrison song, right?
Yeah, she kind of make it her own though.
Yeah. I fucking love that
Oh fuck yeah.
Van Morrison, whatever that was. That band. Them, yeah.
Them.
Yeah. Here's Gloria from Patti Smith. Yeah, it's cool.
It's fucking great. I mean, listen, she is the complete opposite of what Debbie Harry was when she was in CBGBs. I mean, Patti Smith can't fucking sing, and Patti Smith isn't much to look at. You know, like she represents CBGBs a little bit better.
That's because there's the one album cover that she's got her arms aren't shaved, her armpits.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's her.
I think it's I forget what album it is, but she's wearing a tank top and she's got her arm up in the air and her armpits aren't shaved. Very punk rock.
Yeah, she's definitely. I mean, Debbie Harry's the first lady of punk rock or whatever, but Patti Smith is definitely the godmother. I don't know.
I'm not a huge fan of her music, but I totally understand where she fits in.
Oh yeah,
I don't knock
she's
her.
She's like performance art. You know.
Yep. Okay. I got a couple other bands that came up in the 70s that weren't very popular, but I think they were important. So I got 2 bands that were regulars at CBGBs, and the first one was a band called The Dictators, and they were a complete flop commercially. But I thought they were interesting because the singer was a guy named Handsome Dick Manitoba,
Great.
and he was also a professional wrestler. So his whole gig would he'd get up on stage and he would run all over the place and he would taunt the crowd. And they said he would crowd surf before crowd surfing was ever it was called crowd surfing. I put in my notes, television was artsy. The Ramones were deadpan cool. The Dictators were just crazy masculinity. So like at some point, some people start throwing beer bottles on the stage at him and they didn't hit him and he picked one up and he just broke it over his head and almost knocked himself unconscious.
That's fucking punk. He's probably one of the first real fucking, like, I'm going to act like a maniac.
Yeah.
With CBGB, you know?
Here's a song called I Live for Cars and Girls.
I like to make the scene in my machine. I like to make the scene. I leave a minute on the stage whenever I celebrate. I live for cars and girls, cars and girls. I live for cars and girls. I live for cars and girls, cars and girls. I live for cars and girls.
I love that.
Yeah. Just like the Ramones, you definitely hear the 50s influence.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really cool.
I heard of them. I never heard of their music.
Yeah, same here. I'd heard the name, but I'd never listened to them. But I was like, yeah, it was cool. The other band I had from this era were the Dead Boys. So the Dead Boys,
I love the motherfucking Dead Boys.
They were like a band from Cleveland that Joey Ramone encouraged them, like, hey, man, move to New York City and get part of the scene. And Hilly Kristal actually managed them for a little while.
Dude, they were a fucking train wreck.
Yeah, dude. The singer, Steve Baders, was like a shock rock dude. because one of his shtick was he would take the mic cord and he would wrap it around his neck and then throw the other end over a ceiling beam, and he would dangle there while he was singing. And a couple times, like, he actually blacked out while doing it, and they weren't sure if he was still alive.
He was wild, man. I mean, all of them were. The guitar player Cheetah, he was out of his fucking mind. He's still
Was
alive.
he?
I think a lot of them are dead except for Cheetah.
Okay.
And he's still out there. Our listener Holly really loves the Dead Boys.
Okay, right on.
You know, she is one of the most awesome people down at McCuskers. Hey, Holly.
Awesome. What's up, Holly? Thank you so much. They weren't around very long. They broke up in like 79.
Yeah, I mean, they're so legendary. I mean, Sonic producers the fucking song.
Oh, that's amazing, because that's the song I have on the playlist. Here you go.
I don't need anyone, don't need no mom and dad, don't need no food advice, don't need no human rights. I've got some news for you, don't even need you to. I got my damn machine, got my electronic dream. Sonic producer, ain't no loser.
You know how many times I saw Pearl Jam play that fucking song? And every fucking time they bring it, man.
Do they?
That was the first time I ever heard the song, was when Pearl Jam played it in my teens. I saw them do it. I didn't see them in concert. I saw them like on TV or something. They did it.
That's probably where I've heard that song before. I was hearing that and I was like, oh my God, that sounds like Husker Du, and I could hear so much like 80s punk borrowed from that song.
Oh yeah, their whole sound. They're definitely a big influence. But nobody, unless you know like about punk rock and shit, you don't know who the Dead Boys are.
Yep, I agree. You're not going down a rabbit hole uncovering some of these bands. All right. Some other interesting lesser known bands that came out of CBGBs in the early 70s. I don't think I'm going to play all these, but I got some interesting ones. Mink DeVille. Mink DeVille never went anywhere commercially, but I thought they were interesting because it's like a Latin rhythm and blues rockabilly thing. This is a song called Spanish Stroll.
Never heard of them.
I hadn't either until I heard this. This is kind of cool.
Hey, Mr. Jim, I can see the shape you're in. Finger on your eyebrow and left hand on your hip. Thinking that you're such a lady killer. Think you're so slick. Well, all right.
Sounds like Lou Reed.
He does. He sounds a shit ton like Lou Reed. Yeah.
It's kind of blowing me away about how all this music has this 50s music influence on it. It's,
right.
It's pretty amazing. I noticed it before, but now I'm really noticing it.
I had another band on here called the Flesh Tones that I thought had the same kind of thing. Here's Hard Loving Man.
It's my way, I'm a hard-loving man. Loving everything as hard as I can. Like a rock built to last. Not my Chevy, it's my hard-loving feeling. I'm in love, baby, all the time. Hard loving is the state of my mind.
That sounds like a New York Doll song to me.
Sure. Very bluesy, obviously, with the harmonica. That's cool. That's different.
I had two other I got to play on here. One was called a band called the Tough Darts. That everything I read about CBGBs kept talking about them as like a band who could have made it and they never did, who I'd never absolutely heard of. And this is a song called All for the Love of Rock and Roll, and this is recorded live at CBGB.
I love it.
Did you?
I think it's very
okay.
New York Dolls.
Yeah, totally agree.
You sound like David Johansen. I don't know if we're going to talk about David Johansen.
Oh, yes,
later
we
in the-
are.
Okay,
Yes, we
but
are.
that's really
I get that.
New York
Yeah.
Dolls.
The only note I have on them, they're a punk glam band.
They sound like it. They sit,
Yeah.
that's what the fucking New York Dolls was.
And the last band I had of this kind of like this bucket of weird shit that came out was the band Suicide. So Suicide sounded a little bit like Television, but they're also like a little industrial before industrial music was ever a thing. They said they played at CBGB's and Hilly Kristal went up to him and said, I have no idea what that was, but I think you have something here. But everyone hated them. And there's always a story that they played one day. They were so weird. The manager of CBGB walked up to him and said, pull the plug out of their gear and just said, just pack your shit and get the fuck out. And don't ever come back.
They must have been fucking awful then.
Here's a song called Ghost Rider.
He's looking so cute. Sneaking round in a blue jumpsuit. Ghost Rider, motorcycle hero. Baby, he's a blazing away. Like a stars in the universe.
That's way before its time, in my opinion.
Yeah, dude. It's like
definitely something influenced Ministry and shit.
That's what I thought when I heard it too. Industrial music.
Also, I loved it.
It was cool. They had like a marginal that song. They did a song called "Dream Baby Dream" that Springsteen covered. They're weird, but I agree they're way ahead of their time.
Everything CBGB's was weird.
That's true. Do you want to take a quick break?
Sure.
And we'll come back. I got some other I don't got a whole much more shit, but yeah, dude, let's take a break and we'll wrap it up.
All right, stick around.
Prisoners of Rock and Roll is sponsored by McCusker's Tavern at 17th and Shunk Streets in Philadelphia. There's something for everyone on the beer list and the jukebox at McCusker's. It's minutes from the sports stadiums in Philly, making it a great place to stop by for a few drinks before or after a concert or a game. Come see for yourself why everyone from Philadelphia Magazine to Playboy has called it one of the best dive bars in the city. Visit them at 17th and Shunk Streets in Philadelphia or on Facebook. That's McCusker's Tavern.
You don't have to put on the red light. Those days are over. You don't have to sell your body to the night. Roxanne, you don't have to wear that dress tonight. Walk the streets for money. You don't care if it's wrong or if it's right.
All right, we're back from the commercial break. Thanks so much for sticking with us. Just a reminder, the Prisoners of Rock and Roll is sponsored by Boldfoot Socks and McCusker's Tavern in Philadelphia. That was Roxanne by the Police. You may be wondering, what is that doing in this show? That is because in 1978, before the Police were huge, they played in CBGBs to about 40 people, and they played that song.
It was their first show in America.
Yes.
You know what the second show was?
I do not.
J.C. Dobbs on South Street.
In Philadelphia, the legendary J.C. Dobbs. Sting called that place a dump, but he called it a magical dump. CBGB's, not J.C. Dobbs.
He's pretty close with J.C. Dobbs.
J.C. Dobbs.
Back in the day.
There's a handful of bands that were like pretty big that didn't start at CBGB's, but they played passing through. AC/DC played there on their first U.S. tour. They only played to like 150 people because their record label was booking them at all these like small venues to get like the punk audience on board. The B-52s played in there in like 78 before their first album ever came out. Elvis Costello played in there when he was just up and coming, and he played songs like Pump It Up and Watching the Detectives. And maybe Pull Over, and two other bands that played kind of regularly as they were coming up. One was the Misfits. The Misfits played their very first shows in CBGB, so they were like the horror punk band from New Jersey. It would put all their shit in their van and drive up and play in CBGB. You a big Misfits guy?
Fuck yeah, dude.
I
There's like punk influences on punk bands, but the Misfits is a influence on metal.
yeah, that's fair. I wanted to go see them like their farewell tour, but they were playing like Madison Square Garden.
You know what? I was working that night. And then they came to Philly. Guess what?
You were working that night too. Yeah, I didn't go, but
Doug went. He said it was fucking. And Jesse went. They said it was awesome. They went to Madison Square Garden. Jesse took my ticket.
those tickets they were on Groupon for like $20 too. And I was like, oh, we should go. And I just was being a grumpy old man. Didn't. Here's Last Cares by the Misfits.
Metallica is famously covered that song. I've seen them cover that shit a few times. That was like their like encore song.
I'll have to look that up. That sounds awesome.
You can hear them do it on Spotify.
Okay. I will definitely check that out. And another band I want to talk about out of this era, the guys that kind of cut their teeth coming up, the Cramps. And we have not talked about them yet. 96 episodes in. Dude, I like them a lot. So Lux Interior and Poison Ivy, they're rockabilly, they're punk. They played with the Ramones a shit ton at CBGBs in their early years. And here's a song called Bikini Girls with Machine Guns.
Well, I've been a drag racer on LSD. I rode their ass on top of the street. I even had a gorilla on the slopes of Kemet. And man, that was fun for a while, you bet. But skinny girls with machine guns. Skinny girls with machine guns. Oh, this stuff will kill you. It's a loaded with fun. Bikini girls with machine guns. Well, I say good man and for.
I never knew they sound like that.
Yeah, they're real rockabilly.
I don't know anything about them. I know their name and I know like the covers on their albums and shit, but I never knew they were like rockabilly kind of.
Yeah, they're like punk rock and rockabilly. I was the same way. I always saw their album covers working in the record store in the 90s and be like, okay, that's kind of weird. Like, girl dressed in like a corset or some shit. But they're really, really cool.
Again, another sounding 50s. That's, all this rebel 50s music definitely came in this punk music.
Yeah.
We're listening to it,
Which is so, right, again, it's so interesting because it's just a big melting pot of different styles of music coming out of this. All right, I got 3 bands that are like weird that came from, mentioned that Mercer Art Center like collapsed and people came over. And I went and listened to like a couple of the bands that came over from that. And there were some that I was like, all right, it was really weird. Here's a band called The Fast. The Fast are like 3 brothers. They played a shit ton of gigs with the Ramones in those early days at CBGBs. This is a song called Kids Just Want to Dance.
To the hit parade. Kids in Japan, in Rome and France. Kids just wanna dance. Kids at the clubs, in rock and roll bands. Kids wanna dance on American bandstand. Kids in the streets.
That's great.
I thought it sounded like a little Johnny Rotten to singing.
Yeah, I could see them tearing it up, CBGBs.
Yeah.
Were they English?
I'm not sure. They sounded very British.
I mean, that was the thing back then too, is to sound like you were from England. England.
I have a band on here, Ruby and the Rednecks, that Hilly Kristal said they were one of his favorite bands. They played with the Talking Heads and Television a lot. And back in the day at the Mercer Art Center, they would always open for the New York Dolls. So this is called Ruby from the Wrong Side.
Well, everyone suffered for weeks and for weeks when the telephone building burnt down. Well, there were many lonely days when I just didn't speak. Well, over on my side of town. Well, over.
Dude, that is so Rocky Horror Picture Show. It's fucking scary. Like, no, I'm like thinking about Rocky Horror Picture Show is fucking punk. You know, like
Sure.
if you know Rocky Horror, you know what I'm talking about. It has a very 50s feel to it. And all
And
this
it's like-
music does too, you know?
Yeah, and it's like a little like transgender, like gender bending kind of stuff.
I love it.
Yeah, it was really interesting, and I get like, oh my, yeah, absolutely, they're playing with
It's
the New York
so
Dolls.
Rocky Horror Picture. No,
Yeah.
such I could see that so totally.
And it's cool because it's like it's so different some of the other shit that you think of when you hear CBGB. All right, I got one more, and this was a band called Jane Country and the Electric Chairs, and I thought it was interesting because Jane Country used to be an artist called Wayne Country. So it was like in the 70s, this was like a transgender artist who was like embodied like sleaze and queer and punk music. And from what I was reading, they said that this person became like what a lot of like punk fashion took away from like, you know, leather and shit like that. So this is a song called "Because If You Don't Want to Fuck, Then Fuck Off."
Fuck off. If you don't wanna fuck me, baby, fuck off. I ain't got time for yesterday's news. Don't shoot me up with your bullshit balloons. If you don't wanna fuck me, baby, fuck off. If you don't want a piece of the action, baby, take a walk.
Yeah, it's a lot
Yeah,
better.
How did they not get on Tipper Gore's list?
That song's called "The Goddess of Your," or that album's called "The Goddess of Your Wet Dreams." Yeah,
Brilliant.
yeah, and that's
Fucking brilliant.
and it's like a dude who was wearing like that is sleaze before Motley Crue and Poison,
It's like so sleazy. It's comical.
right?
At first, I heard it. I was like, well, I could see like Dinosaur Jr. a little bit. And then he starts singing. I'm like, oh no.
Yeah,
This is something totally whatever.
no, dude, but everything we just played, it was so different. Like all the shit we've been playing for an hour, almost all that music has a completely different sound, and it was all coming out of CBGB's within like a 10-year era.
It's
And,
unreal.
Right? It's so awesome because I always thought when I hear CBGBs, I think of the Ramones and
Sure.
punk music and just
Sure.
dirty, but it was so diverse coming out of there. It's so cool.
It was such more than just music. The fashion, the art, the whole movement came out of there. Just not music.
Sure, absolutely, man. Like everything that punk rock stood for, like the DIY and the biker jackets and shit, it all came out of this place.
Just a lot of weird punk rock staples came out, like people wearing combat boots that started at fucking CBGB's because the sound guy was tired walking in the fucking dog shit. Seriously.
Yeah,
He was tired of stepping in the dog shit, and Crystal's like, go fuck yourself, deal with it. So he went and bought these fucking like combat boots, and he was the first one to wear combat boots.
and it's still like that's still a thing now. Like 40 years later, it's so
And
cool.
he was wearing it because he was tired of
was
stepping in
stepping
dog
in
shit in the club.
You know, all those artists we were just talking about, they were all in the 70s, and in the 80s, CBGB, like, it changed. It became like a hardcore movement. And they used to have these really famous shows on Sundays called the matinees or thrash days.
Most
They-
hardcore shows are Sunday afternoons. A lot of that. Yeah.
But it was cool because it was like if you were into that music scene, if you were like 16, 17 years old and you couldn't be out till 3 a.m, you could go in the afternoon, you could go be around your people and listen to music.
CBGB's.
Except that there was like some violence that spilled out of that shit. But there's like,
Right. That's what hardcore music's about.
yeah, Yeah, it's
Fucking right. Yeah.
as I'm almost 50, I'm like, I don't want to be around the violence. I don't need that.
Hey, I didn't invent it. I just know about it.
I'm just reporting on it. But there were so many of those bands that came, like Black Flag and Bad Brains and the Beastie
yeah.
Boys, and
Oh God, it's endless.
they were all playing in that place. Even like Guns N' Roses played there.
Yeah,
in the 80s.
I remember them playing Nerd. I think that was the first time I ever heard of CBGBs when they played there. They did an acoustic set.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, there was like a little next to CBGB was called it was like a record store and like a little, you could get like snacks and shit. And they went in there and they played it was like right after Appetite for Destruction came out, and they played an acoustic set.
They played I Used to Love Her. I remember that.
And they said that Duff McKagan was like a huge advocate of that place. Like
he was always wearing a CBGB shirt. In his book, he said when he moved to LA, it was like, and Guns N' Roses start fucking happening, because he was from Seattle.
Yeah.
They start happening, and he's like, remembers the moment when he says, I'm picking up the flag of punk rock and bringing it to this band. So he went out and bought like the chain necklace that he always wore, and he always had a CBGB shirt on. So he brought that to like Guns N' Roses.
The internet told me that if you watch the video for Sweet Child of Mine, he's wearing his CBGB t-shirt.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was cool. And then the 90s, it continued on. Like Green Day played there. They still had their
craziest footage I ever saw, and it was probably the last 5-10 years the place was open, and there were a giant band. It was fucking Korn played there.
Wow.
And I guess 100 kids got in, and they were like such a small place. They had like little cameras in the corners to pick up the footage, like spy cameras.
Wow.
That shit looked intense.
I can only imagine. And then there's the end. So the end of CBGB. This is really sad. So the Hilly Kristal leased a building from a group called the Bowery Residence Committee, and all this shit in the 90s, it started to gentrify. And Hilly Kristal's last lease was like $19,000, and it was something in the contract like, hey, we can increase the lease by a modest amount. There was some sort of communication breakdown or whatever the fuck happened. The organization suddenly was like, said that the rent had been going up and Hilly Kristal had not been paying the increased rent, and then suddenly he owed like $91,000 in back rent, and they were like suing each other. And then just as that was going on, his current lease was expiring in 2005, and this group that owned the building wanted to raise his rent from $19,000 a month to $40,000 a month. And then became all that, everything gets legal. Everybody's suing everybody. There was like eviction notices and shit like that. The music industry tried rising up. Artists started talking about, like, speaking out. New York City was like, hey, man, we'll help you move to another location. And he was like, fuck off. This is my home. I'm not doing it. He was in discussions to possibly take the thing to Vegas and start it over again. And none of that ever happened. CBGB closed October 15th, 2006. Hilly Kristal died 10 months later of lung cancer, and that was kind of the end of it. But the epic show at the end was a blowout where Patti Smith just wrecked it.
Yeah, I remember it happening.
And the building is now on the National Register of Historic Places, and I find this kind of gross, but it's now like a John Varvatos clothing store where the graffiti is still there.
There's a beam there that has graffiti on it. That's like the only thing that's left. That's what I was told.
Yeah, I've never been there. It's like, and John Varvatos is like kind of a rock
I don't even know who
fashion
he
dude.
is. I have no idea who he is.
I only know him because Howard Stern wears his shit all the time. So it's like, $1,000 jackets and stuff like that. And the awning is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I remember I was going somewhere for work, and I was flying out of the Newark airport, and I was in the Newark airport at like 5 a.m, and I was really grumpy, and I was walking through the terminal, and I turned to my right, and I saw a restaurant called CBGB, and I felt like the
Burn the
dude,
place down.
right? The dude in Pulp Fiction when he turns around and sees Bruce Willis and they're motherfucker. I'm like, what is this?
I can see you coming with your luggage being
Right.
miserable and starting to see this thing.
And my poor wife had to hear me at 5 a.m. going on this rant because it's like it's a restaurant and it sells like the t-shirts.
Oh, you ain't
but
got to
they're
tell me, dude. It's a Hard Rock Cafe.
Yeah, right. In an
Yeah.
airport. And they will have the signs inside are like CBGB lives on. Like, no, man, that's
It's
awful.
over. It's dead.
Yeah.
But I understand Kristal. Like move to another location. I would never move McCuskers to another location. It's
Right.
fucking over. It's over.
I think he was close to going to Vegas, but then he died.
That would never worked.
It wouldn't have been
Maybe
the same.
it would have. I don't know. Maybe it would have been bigger.
Yeah, I don't
'Cause
know, man.
You can't fucking reproduce something like that. Other clubs in New York City tried to do it after CBGBs. Upstairs, a couple of different places became punk rock places after CBGBs played it. A couple famous places. I don't got the names at the top of my head right now. But yeah, I mean, it's a shame that New York City changed so much that they forced.
Yep.
And that's happens to like neighborhoods.
Sure. It's shit. It happens in Philadelphia, right?
Happens
Near us.
In low class neighborhoods. It happens.
Yeah.
They fucking get everybody out of there, low income, and they tear it down and they build fucking amazing any kind of house that's worth more money than I'll ever be able to fucking afford.
It's like a microcosm in New York. I went from like the gritty, low rent thing filled with kind of scummy people to
Friends.
very, very affluent. Right. The neighborhood from Friends.
And I get the what the fuck is going on.
Oh, yeah.
What the fuck is going on, dude? Exactly. I couldn't say it better myself.
So that's the history of CBGBs, man.
That was fun.
Yeah, that was a lot of ground. We had a lot more we could have talked about, but it was good. All right. Second thoughts. I got 2 second thoughts. First one was we got some feedback on Spotify, and I didn't realize that people could leave comments on
that's crazy.
Spotify. Kenny Melton said, I love your music of 1995 podcast and playlist. Since discovering you guys, I've been binging your episodes. All I can say is keep it up for the rest of us. Prisoners of rock and roll. Great job. And there's no way to respond to a Spotify comment. So Kenny, thank you, dude. We saw your comment. I wish there was a way to reach back out. Drop us an email, man, if we can send you some stickers. Thank you.
Yeah, brother. Keep rocking.
Yeah. And then we have a new podcast friend. So Cameron from Rochester, New York. Cameron sent us an email, and I went back and forth with him several times. But he said, good morning. Here's a little bit how I started listening to your podcast. Music is a huge part of my life, even though I have zero musical talent. And I often discuss it with my son-in-law and my best friends while we're running. We have a music club that we call the Note Club, where each member of the group takes a turn picking an album, which usually goes with a theme. Anyway, all of that gets me to listening to a wide range of music. So back to your podcast. December 28th, my son-in-law told me to listen to your show about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, episode 36. He said, you guys sound just like us talking about music. I really enjoy it. I started listening to a few episodes. They piqued my interest, and I quickly decided to listen from episode 1, and now I'm all the way up to episode 68. When a new episode comes out, I jump ahead and I listen to the new one, and then I go back and start listening to the old ones again. I told myself that I would email when I have a comment about a new episode, and here I am. I enjoy the one about your episode of Music in 1995, but honestly, during one of our music discussions, we said, what modern decade before 2000 would you wipe from music history? And we all unanimously said the 90s. I would love to hear other years and other decades broken down by you guys. I don't agree with every opinion that you two have, but always helps me get through my workday. I would love a couple of stickers. Thank you for the great podcast, Cameron.
Thank you, Cameron. That was fucking great, dude.
Awesome.
And I write such a great email. Like somebody puts time in to write it. It's like a long email like that. That's amazing.
We were going back and forth for a couple times, and I was like, dude, I thank you. And I was like, why would you get rid of the 90s? And I asked him that. I'm like, and he said, for the 90s, I personally think that we would lose the least amount of quote unquote good music. Since I'm also about 5 years older than you two, I take issue that grunge killed hair metal.
I'm with him.
And
I'm a child of I was really young in the hair metal scene. I was like 12 watching MTV with the hair band shit. You know, like,
Oh.
Sure. But the 90s for me, Fish was really good in the 90s. So.
Yeah, it was awesome. Cameron, your stickers are in the mail if you don't have them by the time. I put them in the mail today. It's Thursday, the March 6th. I put them in the mail this afternoon, so with a note. So hopefully you get them before you hear this. But thank you so much, man. And we were going back and forth over email like all weekend. It was great. Yeah, dude, and I love that, man. Like, we hear somebody,
Yeah, dude.
Right? We don't know, just writes us in, and it's like, just, you know, I've gone like Josh from Boldfoot. Like, we didn't know him beforehand. I went out, like, I'm having beers with him talking music. It's just so cool. You know?
Fans, baby. We got fans.
Yeah. And it's not just a warden bringing them to us. All right. I got 2 music news. The first one was David Johansen passing away. So David Johansen, he was the singer for the New York Dolls. He was also Buster Poindexter.
Don't forget about that.
And he was the ghost of Christmas Past and Scrooged.
Yeah.
And David Johansen, the New York Dolls, man, we need to dive into them a little bit more in an episode at some point, how important they are.
I saw them on the reunion tour.
Did you really?
Yeah. I saw them at the Trocadero in Philadelphia.
Was it good?
It was fucking great.
Oh, I got on board with them pretty late. I think when we started doing the show was when I got exposed to them. Like, I was like, oh my God, they're so important.
I got the record on vinyl.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I found that at a convention. I bought it right away.
He was in bad shape too. He had like stage 4 cancer, and he had fallen out of bed and broken his back, and he was bedridden. And what I thought was really sad was his family turned to a charity, and they were like asking for donations to pay for his medical care. And it was a group called the Sweet Relief Musicians Fund that all they do is raise funds for musicians, some of whom are marginally famous, to pay for their medical care. And I'm like, this is a guy who was in music for like 40 years. And he was still like, he couldn't afford his medical bills.
Those guys didn't make any fucking money.
It's sad. It really is sad.
You don't remember the Sweet Relief compilation album back in the day?
I do. Yeah. Yeah.
Pearl Jam was on it.
Yeah. It's a guy who was entertaining people for 40 years and doing all these different characters. And then he's like, I need charity to pay my bills.
I think that he's just a product of the music industry. Chews
Agreed.
them up and spits them out.
Yeah.
And then it's a shame.
Sad. Yeah. The second story I had was REM reunited for like one night. So
what?
The 4 original members of REM made a surprise appearance at a concert being held by actor Michael Shannon, who we talked about in our episode on celebrity albums, and we were not very kind to him. But they reunited at the 40 Watt Club in Athens, Georgia, which is a club where REM got started. So much like CBGB helped the New York music scene, the 40 Watt Club was a essential music scene in Athens. VH1 once called it the second most important music club in the world. CBGB was number 8. They got together, they played one song, but it was only the second time that they've all 4 of them have performed together since 2011, since they broke up. So,
fuck them.
Yeah,
the world's a better place without them.
Yeah,
I can't get away from losing my religion though. It's fucking always on the fucking radio somewhere on there.
They were the first song. That was the first song to ever go in the electric chair. And all right, the electric chair. So the electric chair is where we kill a song for being terrible. And I asked Cameron, who emailed us, I was like, dude, what do you got for the electric chair, man? Give us something. And he said, do you like Imagine Dragons? Because I could imagine dragging them into the fire.
That's a great one.
I'm just playing whatever the fuck is top one. Believer. And I think I told you they were like shitty Coldplay. And Coldplay is not very good to begin with. It's like
I don't know. I know this band's name. I don't know any of their music. If I'm hearing on the headset now, it's like, yeah, they're annoying. I know who they are.
My son was into them when he was like 12, And I asked him the other day, I was like, hey man, we're going to put this in the electric chair. Do you still like them? He's like, don't ever tell anybody I like them. So he grew out of them very quickly. Yeah. There is no soul in any
They
of it.
suck. They're
There's
like
no
the
soul in
fucking
it.
Sugar Ray of the fucking time.
They're like the Sugar Ray of Coldplay music.
Look,
The Warden may like this. I mean, the Warden's a big
he has a
Coldplay
tattoo,
fan.
dude. Song sucks. The whole
This is-
sound sucks.
Yeah, when Cameron, yeah, hang on, let me kill this so we don't get fucking sued by them.
We sentence you to death.
I don't want to be like, thanks, Cameron. We love you. Thanks for writing in. Now we're getting sued by Imagine Dragons for your suggestion.
It's all your fault.
When he sent that to us, I wrote him back. I'm like, oh my God, it's a great
Perfect.
pick. They're awful. Yeah,
That's perfect.
There is no soul in that music. There's so much passion and energy in everything we played tonight, and then we played that.
So, Bruce, you and I been in contact a lot in the last month, and my father is very sick. He's been in the hospital with pneumonia, and it's been pretty bad, and things are getting worse and worse every day. Now, my dad was always proud of me, but the most he ever said he was proud of me is because of the show. He flat out told me he was proud of me, of what we did together out of nothing, and how our passion took over and why we do it. And he just respected the hell out of us. And he told me how much, and my whole music career, there was a few times that he told me, but he flat out told me he was proud of me for our Prisoners of Rock and Roll show. And doing the show tonight really helped me out. This has been a really hard time in my life. And I'm going to keep trying doing the show as much as we can. So if we miss a week here and there, guys, it's because I can't deal with going on in my life. Shit's real. And it's, Bruce, I told you, it's ride or die time for me. And I just wanted to share that my dad was proud of me because of our show. And that was like one of the most times that I remember that he ever said. There was a few times, but that's the most that I remember him telling me.
Thank you for sharing that. I know we've spoken privately a lot about what's going on with your family, and you shared that with me the other day, and that made me feel really good, and I hope it made you feel really good, because we started this as a hobby, and we talked about it for a long time.
Oh, it's just like how we get writers. Like he just thought how great that was. Like he was so impressed. And my dad's been in the bar business for 50 something years. He's not impressed by shit.
It's very cool, and this shit you got going on has been going on for a while, and we haven't talked about it on the show, and always thought, hoping that this would be a couple hours to just kind of pull your mind away from shit. And said, like, let's talk about music, let's make fun of the Warden, and let's have a couple laughs and step away from reality for a little bit. I really hope this helps with everything you're going on, man.
It fucking does, dude.
I hope it adds some levity to your life, because it sure does for mine. And I say this every 2 weeks, but it is a pleasure getting to sit and talk with music for 2 hours with you.
And Bruce, thank you for being there for me, for always calling me and checking on me. And, it means the world to me, bro.
You have evolved beyond being my toady, my friend. It was a long time ago.
I'll always be the toady.
You've been promoted beyond that. So
I'll come clean your bathroom anytime you want.
all right. On that note, we're closing the door on this episode just like they shut the door on CBGB. But the only difference is we're not going to turn up as a lame restaurant in the Newark airport. But if you want to hear more of all the great bands that we talked about coming out of CBGB, there is a Spotify playlist down in the show notes. We do that for every episode. And while you're down there, you can find a link to our website at prisonersofrockandroll.com, our email at show@prisonersofrockandroll.com, our Facebook and our Twitter accounts, and there's a map to the legendary McCusker's Tavern. Like I said in the monologue, it smells half as bad as CBGB did. So
Doug will fuck you up for saying that, dude.
It doesn't even smell half as bad as the legendary CBGB did. We'll be back in 2 weeks, and we'll figure out what we're going to talk about next. And Ryan, this was so much fun, brother. I had a great time tonight.
Thank you. And from the bottom of my fucking heart.
I got your back, my boy.
Keep on rocking!
Peace out.
I'm just a prisoner! Of rock and roll!